I mean, remember one more time I said to David, let me create the look of this character. And Frida Kahlo had just come, I mean, I was not aware of her, and I remember walking in a bookstore and seeing a book with her image and looking at it and being fascinated by her because she was attractive and repellent at the same time. She has this thick eyebrow and sometimes a little mustache, and yet so appealing, the clothing and the stories she tells about her torment. So when I read the character in Wild at Heart, my character had the most beautiful name, Perdita Durango. And so I said, can I look like Frida Kahlo? Because I think Perdita Durango should be sexy, appealing, but also repellent, terrifying in a way. And so we created, I had the thick eyebrow, the blonde wig, but with the roots black. And I even drew a little mustache, but David said that's too much.
So good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome to the SAG to talk about your career, and we're going to focus a lot on your work. Yeah. But you have a life that also intersects. Your life and your work do intersect. There's a story actually I'm going to ask you to tell in a few minutes about going to dinner one night and meeting at the next table this young, strange film director who had made The Elephant Man, and how that changed your life, that going to that restaurant as opposed to a different restaurant.
Yes, exactly.
But actually, to be a little bit personal in the beginning, I wanted to offer congratulations on the marriage of your son.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he got married 2 weeks ago. Thank you. Thank you.
And you got married on Mama Farm, which we might also talk about a little bit later.
Mama Farm is my farm. I have a farm.
The way I wanted to begin, actually, maybe as a way to speak somewhat about your childhood, I wanted to begin by asking about your voice.
Oh.
Some.
Not my beauty.
Well, actually, I think they are very, very connected. For those of us who enjoy you in English language films, there's some Italian, there's some Swedish in your voice. You were born in Rome.
Yes.
Tell us about growing up and the early, what gave you your voice, maybe, the earliest?
Well, my mom was Swedish. My mom is Ingrid Bergman. Yes. My father, Roberto Rossellini, is Italian. And I have the accent because of the scandal they created. So I remind you of the scandal that created my accent. My mom was a very, very successful Hollywood actress. And she was working, Casablanca, Notorious, Hitchcock, Fleming, all this big director. And she saw my father's film, Rome Open City, and then Paesa. And she was so taken back by this film. They were called neorealism. They were films shot in Italy right after the war. They looked like documentaries. That's why the critic called them neorealism. They looked, but they weren't. They were feature film, but they looked so real. And they had a great actress called Anna Magnani, and Mama was so enamored of this style of films that she wrote my father a letter saying, I would like to work with you. And I always imagined it would be like today, I don't know, Julia Roberts write to a Syrian director, or Gazan director. And my father, because Italy, right after the war, was destroyed. So father was taken back, and they've met, and he wrote a film for her, and they started to work together, but they fell in love. And Mama became pregnant before she could divorce her husband in America. And this created a very big scandal. And the American Senate took a stand. The Senate took a stand against Mama that was not allowed to come back to United States. All her money was confiscated. But the worst, I think, for her has been that she was not allowed to see her daughter, Pia, my older sister, for 8 years. It was a very, very severe punishment. So I came to America for the first time when I was 19. And I grew up speaking French and Italian, English just at school. And that's why I have an accent, because if you learn languages after a certain age, you will always have the accent. Well, I tried very much to erase it, and I'm delighted to hear that there's a little bit of Swedish, because my mama is there. But also I tried not to just be an Italian actress. At the beginning, I was worried to just be typecast because of my accent. So I'm delighted I play a German, an Hungarian, a French,
Yes.
and I could camouflage my accent. And lately, what honor, I was asked to be in The Incredible, the Pixar film,
Yes.
doing the ambassador. And so I asked her, why did you choose me? And they said, because we wanted somebody who spoke well English, but had an accent. But it's Pixar, it's an animation, it's an invented world. We didn't want somebody who could characterized as Italian or French. So I was very honored because I worked very hard at trying to camouflage my accent. I did that even in Marcel the Shell. I was a shell. I said, why did you hire me? Oh, you liked it. He said, why did you hire me? He said, because we wanted, you're a shell, you have to have an accent. I said, but why? Why would a shell have an accent? And the director gave me a surreal answer. Oh, because she grew up in the garage. Okay, of course, it makes sense.
Yes, I didn't want to forget to mention Marcel the Shell with shoes on.
Yes.
So good. So at about 19 or 20, your first time coming to New York.
Yes, coming to America, yeah, to New York. I think the first time I went to Hollywood, I was 25.
Interesting to see when things happened for you, because you became a model. You weren't old, but you were old in the modeling world.
Yes.
You were in your late 20s.
Yes.
Tell us about that journey, I guess. I mean, maybe you can describe meeting the people you had a chance to meet, like Richard Avedon.
Yes.
So
So when I finished school in Italy, I attended a school to become a costume designer. I knew that I love film and I love clothing, and because my family was in film, the simple thing was to become a costume designer. And I worked in some of my father's film. He gave me a little job to dress up the extra, make sure they didn't walk home with the shoes or the shirt, And then when I came here to America to learn English better, because Mama said, you have to speak English. I was plagued by the fact that we weren't fluent in English. I came here to go to university and take a course in English. I was offered a job at the Italian television, RAI, which is the public television. And I worked with Roberto Benigni. I worked in comedies. And I did a little skit telling funny stories about America, the competition of how many hot dogs you ate. But I also ended up for a month at Muhammad Ali's camp. Because Muhammad Ali was beyond sports. People wanted to know about him. And so I was sent to be for a month in Pennsylvania and just every other day do a little story on his mom, Angelo Dundee, the trainer, or what time did he wake up, what did he eat. And they were light and comical. But I knew how to make short films, which then came many years later.
Right.
But I learned there. And when I was in New York, because most story came from America, America is loved and the world is very curious about America, I was offered to become a model. So I met Bruce Weber, who was a photographer, and he was so nice. I said, sure, but I didn't think it was going to become a big career. And instead, within 6 months, it became a major career with cover of Vogue, that it is like the crowning and big Lancome contract. And so it propelled me into a world that I had not, I loved, because I love costume, and fashion is modern costume. But I didn't know it was going to last. I thought everybody said, oh, if you're a model, within 2 years, they don't want you anymore. So I said, well, let me live this adventure. Instead, it's still going. So I've been a model for 50 years. I didn't want to be an actress because my mom was so famous. And I thought that I would be always, when I was very little and people say, you want to be an actress? And I would say, yes. They say, aren't you afraid? afraid. So, I got discouraged, and I tried to still be in film with costume, and then modeling was, at the time I thought he was not connected with acting, but then when I met Richard Avedon, he said, but modeling is like being a silent movie star because you don't have words, but you still have to emote in front of my camera. Do you think I photograph beautiful noses? Of course, there's no beauty without emotions. And so it made me think about it, and I thought, yeah, maybe I can evolve my career. And Mama was so, Mama, by the time I got my first cover of Vogue, she died of breast cancer. But Mama wanted me so badly to be an actress, and she said, you have everything it takes. I played a nun, as I'm playing in this film, the last film. My first film, I played a nun. My mom was dying in a film directed by Vincent Minnelli with Liza Minnelli, A Matter of Time, a film that was not successful, at all. But Mama, I was an extra playing the nun because she was trying to tempt me to become an actress. And I was so afraid. And she would say, of the criticism or the comparison. And she said, but this is ridiculous. This is a fantastic job. And yes, you'll be at the beginning, there will be, but then it goes away. So when Mama was still alive, I did my first film with the Taviani brother. And both Mama and I were right. I got criticized so badly, compared to her so badly, that I got hurt. And for 5 years, I didn't go back to acting. But Mama said, you cannot not work with great talent like the Taviani brothers. And they are big talent. And we stayed friends all my life. So both was true.
I wanted to jump forward, actually, not to Blue Velvet yet, but to White Knight, because that's the film where you played Gregory Hines' wife.
Yes.
A movie about ballet. Because there's an important connection, because in addition to Gregory Hines and Mikhail Baryshnikov, Helen Mirren is in White Knight.
Yes.
That's important because you were in that film. And tell us about getting that role, and that being not like 10 years earlier with A Matter of Time, that being a successful movie that you got good reviews for.
I don't think the film had come out yet. I don't think White Knight had come out yet. So you mentioned before that I went to this restaurant, and I was with Dino De Laurentiis' wife, the wonderful Martha De Laurentiis, a producer, and I was at dinner with Martha, and David Lynch came with Raffaella De Laurentiis. Raffaella is daughter of Dino, and her first husband. And so, because they were family, we said, let's got the table together. And so we all sat together. And David that evening found out that I had just finished White Knight with Helen Mirren. And he wanted very much Helen Mirren to be in Blue Velvet playing my role. And he kept on saying, give me your phone number. And I said, no, because she's a star. You don't give out phone numbers of stars. And then the next day, I received a note with a script. And he said, in second thought, would you like to consider the role? And I read it. And I understood it was controversial. But I called David and I said, David, and I called Marty too. Marty interestingly said, Elephant Man is a great film, but look at Eraserhead. Because Eraserhead was much more the signature of David Lynch as an author, and he loved it. So I called David, and I said, David, let's have dinner or so. I would like to test a film with you, because I want to totally understand what we are. That character can be played in so many different ways. And to me, it was the portrait of a battered woman, maybe somebody who had a Stockholm syndrome. And David didn't really want to talk so much about, a lot of directors, they don't want to have a lot of the backstory that we actors create for the character. They just want to see what they are seeking in their head. But David called Kyle MacLachlan, and David, Kyle, and I improvised the scene a little bit like actors do when you have to flush out the dialogue. You don't just say the lines that you know by heart, but if you have a fight with your husband, they say, okay, for half an hour, fight with your husband, and and you flush out what these few lines that collapse in 1 minute to fight say. So we did that, and David seems to be, and I seem to be in complete agreement on the interpretation of Dorothy Valance, the character, and that's how I got the film.
It's an extraordinary movie. I mean, controversial, I suppose, at the time, but has really stood up over these many years. Tell us about getting into character, were there any tricks? I mean, she's wearing a wig, but we know she's wearing a wig. There are certain...
Yeah. Well, yes, I think that was the intent. I think David was so kind and so trusting of actors that I said to him, I studied to be a costume designer, and I would like to be able to create the look of Dorothy, because I think she's hiding her, like a lot of battered women, they're very secretive. And so I want to be like a doll, because I have to hide behind that facade. And so the wig, the blue eyeshadow, the red lipstick, everything has to be kind of perfect, because she is a doll and she's hiding this torment. And I remember David gave me wonderful images when he was directing me, because some director can be very articulated. David is not, but he emotes a lot, so you can just follow. But he would say to me, "The clouds are coming," and so when I sing, sometimes you see her breaking, because David had given me "The clouds are coming," and they gave me a wonderful image of this anxiety and this torment that could invade her. And so, yes, when Blue Velvet came out, it was very controversial, but some people liked it. And I think it was 10 years ago, when it was the 20th or 25th anniversary, there was a screening at MoMA. So I wrote to David, MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, can you imagine?
At that time, the most popular film critics were Siskel and Ebert.
Yes.
And they had a big disagreement about Blue Velvet. One of them loved it, thinks it was an all-time classic film, Siskel, I think, and Ebert did not like it, and thought that you were taken advantage of. And the other guy said, "She's walking around New York City right now. She's fine." I mean, like, it's acting,
Well, I have to say that I haven't read... I try to avoid reading reviews, because they can hurt. I mean, even if they don't intend to hurt, or even if they are so-so, but you always remember, and they give you such insecurity, so I try not to read it. Inevitably, there is a friend that calls and says, "Why did that person say that about you?" So I remember, I remember that I ran into Ebert, Roger Ebert, one day, and I said, and somebody said, he thought you were used, and I thanked him. I said, "It was so kind of you to think that I need protection. I'm an adult. I mean, okay, I just did that film. I did it with consciously." And he was just taken back. I wasn't at all scolding him. I was really thanking him, because I thought, how nice of him to be worried about me.
Also, I think it's kind of, I think that the fact that there was this intellectual debate between two critics over something like that was probably healthy for
It reflected the debate that there was at the time the film came out. Some people loved it and some people hated it.
Yeah.
I think the Post wrote about me, Ingrid Bergman to rise from the grave, because she's been dead, and give her a citizen arrest.
Well, actually, also, were there nuns who were praying for you?
Yeah, my nuns. So I grew up in Italy, and I went to Catholic school, And my nuns, oh, I felt so bad for them because they felt guilty. They felt, oh, what did we do for her to play this role? And I remember writing them a long letter saying, but she's a battered wife, and you always protected women, and I was explaining all my background that I created, and David Lynch, I think, is a great artist, and and they just answer, well, we're praying for you, and yesterday, Sunday, we gave a mass, and we'll collectively pray for you, which I thought it was very touching, because there were people that wanted to protect me in case I was Dorothy Valance, but I just played Dorothy Valance.
Well, and also, and we'll talk about your current role in Conclave as a nun a little bit later. What did your talent...
It's interesting, because I always find it, because I'm doing press and sometimes Blue Velvet comes out. And it's funny because both roles represents women in an incredible situation. In a way, Blue Velvet, she's a singer, she's beautiful, she looks like a doll, and she's a battered woman, completely broken inside. And in Conclave, I play a nun who never speaks, who is very subservient, but has enormous authority. So it's interesting because you can play opposite of, what you assume. If you're a nun, you're, very, no, you can have authority. I mean, my nuns had a great authority, but we'll get there.
One other thing I wanted to mention, because I don't want to forget Dennis Hopper, who was just this nightmare vision of a villainous character. But I wonder what filming those scenes was like, because there had to have been some sense of levity on the set when he's sucking in some kind of gas and then going after you. But it wasn't as scary as it looks in the final film.
Shooting is not as scary, because especially beating and all this is all choreographed.
Yeah.
You have a person, 1, 2, 3, punch, and you go like this, and the other one, and the camera. So it's very mechanical. Sometimes what looks horrifying when you are in the audience. I remember, two things about Blue Velvet, and I'm Ingrid Bergman's daughter. Laura Dern, she had done Mask, and she played a character blind. And when David hired me, then he had Kyle, and he had me. And then he called me saying, Laura Dern is going to play the ingenue. And I thought, how interesting that he had hired a blind actress. Because she's ingenue, and so is the symbolism of not seeing. So when I first met Laura Dern, and she said, nice to meet you, I grabbed her hand. And then I said, careful, now there is a step. She said, yeah, I can see it. You can see it? I'm Ingrid Bergman's daughter. I should know about acting. I was completely fooled by Laura's incredible talent. And Dennis Hopper came last after the three of us were cast. And David called me and said, we have Dennis Hopper. I said, Dennis Hopper, really? How is he? And he said, he's like a ticking bomb. Dennis had just come out after 3 years of rehab. And he was a fantastic man because he had done the journey through hell and back up.
What did your talent agency, ICM, think about Blue Velvet?
They stopped representing me. Twice agents stopped representing me. I have no luck with agents. I have no luck with agents. I think, I don't know that I'm giving the right answers. It's twice I've been rejected by agent. And I think that I see my father was the ultimate experimental filmmaker, if you want. So I feel very comfortable when there is a new talent, somebody that does an original film. So when I did the film with David, my agent dropped me. And you know who called me? Tom Loddy, the great Tom Loddy, producer Tom Loddy, who created the Telluride Film Festival. And he offered me a film. He loved the film. He loved Blue Velvet. He offered me a film with Norman Mailer called Tough Guys Don't Dance. And the film was not successful at all. But he gave me, to be with these guys of enormous talent. And and appreciated, made me feel like I can continue being an actress even if my agent doesn't want me. And then it took a while, a few years, and then another agent came. And then that agent, I wanted, Guy Maddin was a Canadian avant-garde filmmaker, sent me his script and several of his reels, and one was 7 minutes long. I said, "I'll look at that." And he was Heart of the World. I don't know if you're familiar with Guy Maddin's film. He has now a film out with Kate Blanchett called Rumor. And I just saw this 7 minutes film, and I thought, this is incredible talent. I want to work with you. So I asked David Lynch, can I fly to Winnipeg and meet with you and talk? But, and my agent said, if you're going to work with Guy Maddin, I slash my wrist. So I thought it was a joke. I worked with Guy Maddin. Also, he said, I cannot represent you anymore. Well, I didn't have an agent for another 10 years. Yeah, directors called me, and now I have an agent. I feel very good. Because I get more work when you have an agent.
I did want to say, if people have not seen The Heart of the World, go on the internet if you can, or wherever. It is
the
one
Criterion
of the most,
Channel.
Criterion
Sorry to
Channel.
push it, but it is the best. Because, isn't it? Because in the Criterion Channel, there is all this support. It's curated. You have interviews with the director, with film critics, with historian. It teaches you about film. It's amazing.
And we will maybe talk a little bit more about Guy Maddin. I think that there's a theme, though, of doors closing, doors opening, doors reopening.
Maybe for everybody in life. I don't know.
Yes, I think so.
Me,
So you also stayed with David Lynch and had a relationship with him for a little while, and also appeared opposite crazy Willem Dafoe in Wild at Heart.
Yeah.
I've actually interviewed him on this very stage about his character, those teeth that were like on top of his real teeth. You're also, because you're his girl in the movie.
Yes.
It's a elevated performance, and I've heard that Frida Kahlo was an inspiration for you.
Yes, I remember one more time I said to David, let me create the look of this character. And Frida Kahlo had just come, I was not aware of her, and I remember walking in a bookstore and seeing a book with her image and looking at it and being fascinated by her because she was attractive and repellent at the same time. She has this thick eyebrow and sometimes a little mustache, and yet so appealing, the clothing and the stories she tells about her torment. So when I read the character in Wild at Heart, my character had the most beautiful name, Perdita Durango. And so I said, can I look like Frida Kahlo? Because I think Perdita Durango should be sexy, appealing, but also repellent, terrifying in a way. And so we created, I had the thick eyebrow, the blonde wig, but with the roots black. And I even drew a little mustache, but David said, that's too much. So we took the mustache off.
I wanted to, one of the things about your career, you're very adventurous in your choices, and it doesn't have to be a big role. You will take something. Maybe I can ask you now, what are if it's a small role, let's say, is it the script, the director, the location, something new? Like what?
Yeah, yes, all of it, I think the director is important. The script, the story, the character, who are the other actors. And it's fantastic. I sometimes think it's even harder to play a small role than a big role, because when you have a big role, you have several scenes, and if you say, I forgot that aspect of the character, maybe you can show it a little bit later on, a lightness, a laughter, if you play, because there's always some humor in life. So you can, if you have one or two scenes, it's like, you with an arc, boom, you have to really get into the bullseyes if you want to give it a complete portrait of a person. So, plus there is the human factor. When you are playing a big role, you are 2 months with the same people, the crew. When you play a small role, you might appear in front of very known people, very big character, very important director, and the entire crew waiting, and if you fumble on your lines, or you crumble. So sometimes a small role are harder to play.
Well,
But I accept them because I don't know. I accept things that are interesting. Yeah.
well, this is tees up perfectly in terms of those bullseye performances. Death Becomes Her.
Oh yeah. That becomes or has become very popular lately.
Yes.
I mean, maybe because it's going to be a musical, and they asked me to do the voice. You know, the one they say, turn off your phone and don't take photos. So I'm writing it. Now a warning. And some of the audience will not know what it is, but some of the audience who have seen the film a lot, they would recognize my voice.
Yes. And a very, you co-starred with Meryl Streep, a very great reaction from her saying,
yeah.
Now
a warning.
After she's had the potion. You talked about working with experimental directors, and in a way, even though he makes big budget movies, Robert Zemeckis.
It is completely. I tested for the film, and Zemeckis is such a gentleman, such a kind person. He said, Isabella, you are one of the first actresses I've seen for this role, and the studio wants me to see many more actresses, some more known than you. At the time, I was really just a model. I'd done Blue Velvet, but it was controversial, so it didn't count. And I wanted it so much because, of course, I had been doing the Lancome advertisement for 14 years, and they all had this anti-age cream. And I thought, oh, that would be so ironic and so funny. And then for a month, I heard nothing. But when I left, when you test for directors, sometimes they don't have the gentleness that Bob Zemeckis had with me, explaining I have to see many more people. There is an ensemble of actors. There is many producers and many other factors that have to decide. But you're a great actress. So you left feeling, encouraged about your talent. Also, maybe you didn't get the role, and 3 weeks later, a month later, he called me and he said, the role is yours. So I was so pleased. And he had done Roger Rabbit, Forrest Gump. So, the trailers were immense. It was a big Hollywood film. So I said, I was going to work with Meryl Streep, with Bruce Willis. Amazing was he in that film. And when I arrived, it felt like being on my father's set. He worked with all his friends from high school where they did all the experiment on the visual effect, because all these films are about visual effect. But it was that camaraderie, that sense of playfulness, and that old complicity of artisans, or the new artisans, if you want, because they did special effect. But they had that, I felt so comfortable, so at home, though the film was big Hollywood film.
Is that a case maybe where, in addition to the script, also the costume can sort of help the performance? You wear it's all jewels as a top.
So I have a necklace, so I'm naked, just have a little skirt, and I have a necklace. Of course, we placed the necklace in a way that, my breast was always covered, but you don't know that because it is so beautiful, and any moment you can expose myself. We had so much fun with the costume designer. There was one dress that I had that it didn't register in the film because it was like a coat, and we had magnet. And every time I turned, if I turned with a little bit of violence, it opened. And every time I turned back, it closed. But it didn't work, but it worked, but it wasn't filmed. But we had so much fun creating the costume for the crazy lady. And Death Becomes Her.
I've also heard you tell a kind of a touching story about the making of that movie, where there's a scene where the character comes out of a swimming pool.
Yeah.
And you had asked Robert Zemeckis for a body double, because you wanted her to be more statuesque.
Yes.
It's not. I don't think you were.
Yeah. In Blue Velvet, my agent, and then later on asked me to leave, said and he gave me some good advice. He said, if you want to do naked, if you have to do a naked scene, you have to do it yourself, because then you can have control. Because otherwise, if you're not on the set, they might film something that you are not agreeing. So for me, I mean, in Blue Velvet, I never thought I was going to do a naked scene. I'm Ingrid Bergman's daughter, you know, Mama never showed. But in the case of Blue Velvet, I didn't think I could avoid it, because David told me a story that happened to him when he was a little boy. He said he was coming back from school with the brother, and they saw a naked lady walking in the street, and they burst into tears because they understood that something horrible had happened. They didn't laugh, they didn't make fun of her, they didn't get excited, they cried. And he said, I want the film to have that effect. When you appear, I want people to be horrified. I don't want it to be sexy, I don't want to be just horrified. And to my mind, it came that image of the Vietnam War, the little girl naked in the napalm bomb. And she's walking with this completely helpless attitude. If she walked like this, she still had some dignity, she still had some strength. So I couldn't come up with any other gestuality that was so telling. And so I did it. But of course, it was frontal nudity, and that also added to the controversy of the film. When I did Death Becomes Her, again, there was a scene where I had to come out of the pool naked, wearing high-heeled shoes, swimming, but with high-heeled shoes. And it was so funny. But I did say, in that case, I said to Bob, you know, I don't think I have that statuesque body. She has to be like a goddess coming out. So maybe it's important to have a body double. And they came with a book of tits, ass, body, and I choose, because I said I want to have control, meaning I want to be there when the young girl is there, because I want to make sure she's feeling comfortable. And it was this book. So I said, I don't know how to choose. I felt like Sophie's Choice. I mean, oh my God, the book was amazing. They said, well, skin tone. Oh, okay, that made sense. So finally, we got a young girl, and she came, and I said, please introduce me to her. And I said, you know, I can be on the set if you want. I can be on my trailer, but I'm here. Anything you tell. She completely oblivious. She was so happy to have the role. I was surprised, but she did a good job coming out and looking statuesque. And I've been there like a mama, making sure that she was fine, that nobody gave her any uncomfortable moment, or because she was very beautiful, so there was always a risk. But really needed to make us such a gentleman.
What was it like to work with Meryl Streep on a comedy? For her at that time, that was pretty rare.
Yes.
But you know, people who know her know that she's actually off camera very funny.
Very funny.
You just mentioned Sophie's Choice just now, as become one of her famous roles. What was that like for those few weeks when you got to just be for 8 hours, 10 hours a day with her?
Well, you know, I don't remember. I mean, we remember talking a little bit, but you know, I tried to be on my corner and not disturb the stars. You know, you learn that in a set is very. You have to respect people's privacy and concentration. I think sometimes it's harder to do comedy than drama, and so I did a film with Robert De Niro, Joy, and. I know Robert because, of course, I was married to Marty. And I'm sure you know him and must have come and talked to you. You know how shy he is? It doesn't make any sense when he talks. But you also know that he doesn't want to talk. And so when I was on Joy, and when I'm on the set, I also don't want people to talk to me, because it's not, sometimes I stay in character, sometimes I don't want to be distracted, because you have to kind of be in a neutral state so that you can jump in the moment they say play the scene, and you can be ready. I can't read a book that is too involving or the news that are too frightening. It has to be neutral until the moment you work. and so in Joy, I found that neutrality to sit next to Bob because he didn't want to talk, and nobody comes near because he's known not to want to talk. So I just sat next to him, and he was completely comfortable because he understood that I was using him, so we won't be talked. So in That Becomes Her, I don't remember having found Robert De Niro, but I was respecting Meryl's privacy, and I remember Bruce Willis, who is sick now, and doing that role, it was so great because he was completely against character.
Yes.
And so fascinating to see an actor change so much, isn't it?
Yeah. Great movie. I think one that's, as you just mentioned, is more and more popular, and the themes that it gets into are increasingly popular as well. Wanted to go flash forward about a year or two, Fearless.
Yeah.
A remarkable movie where you play Jeff Bridges' wife.
Yes.
Peter Weir directing. And I've heard you mention that he gave you a piece of advice about dance.
Well, he said something to me because I'm always trying to. People say to me, "How does a director direct?" And they have different ways, of course. And sometimes, and I remember that Peter Weir said about my character, you have to play it like a flamenco. And that gave me completely, how do I stand? My head, the strength, the dignity, this woman in Fearless, Jeff Bridges plays a victim of a plane crash, but he survives. But in having seen death up close, he comes back home completely changed and completely in love and bonded with a character played by Rosie
Perez. Yeah.
Rosie Perez,
Yeah.
right? Rosie Perez, and the wife is completely taken back. So play her like a flamenco, defending her family, the marriage, come back.
Yeah.
And it gave me just that word, gave me such a good sense of who my character was.
Yeah. What was it like rehearsing for that one? Because I think that, since this is all about acting, one of those techniques of like improvising for like a full hour so that you're going beyond your characters between you and Jeff Bridges,
Yes.
and getting into it and finding like what is the heart of
Jeff
this?
and I, we decided to go to dinner together and behave like a couple. Not that we were holding hand or anything, but we wanted to see if people around us felt that we knew each other, because and then we talked and we improvised a lot. In character, what these two people were saying, even before the accident or after. It gives you the confidence to work. It's not in films. They don't rehearse that much anymore. Who knew how to do the rehearsal brilliantly was John Schlesinger, who also worked in the theater, and I did a film that he was not successful, The Innocent, and with Tony Hopkins. And I remember Tony Hopkins and I improvising in the relationship. We were husband and wife, but I murdered him. And so we were talking about, we weren't talking about the relationship. We talked as if we were the character. And you can flash out so much. You're surprised yourself about what comes out of you. But then when you have to say those lines that are in the film, the one that you memorized, they are full of emotion, And that is, I love to do that. So sometimes the director offers it to do it with you. And with Peter Weir, he wanted to. He wasn't not sure about the dialogue as it was written on the script, and so he'd ask us to improvise and to take notes. And he has changed the dialogue, selecting bits of what we had done to rewrite that scene. Those are magical moments in films.
There's also a scene in that movie where because he now feels very invincible, and he goes up to a rooftop of a really tall building, like I think it's in a
Yeah.
big city, and stands on the ledge of the roof, and he's just like dancing around, and you see it happen and run over, and I think I've heard you say that Peter Weir did many different takes of that because it was all about finding what is her
reaction.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in one of them, you
I slapped him.
yeah.
And it was difficult to imagine what would be so you see your husband dancing like crazy on the edge and maybe falling because she's maybe wants to feel again the moment before death. And so he does these dangerous things. And you as a wife, you see him, what do? You talk like a sleepwalker, you go very close, slowly grab him, or you disturb him, or you respect it and you pray God that he's not falling. So we did several takes, and in one of them, it was funny, sometimes, as they say, be in the moment, as an actor, counts a lot. And I remember feeling this rage that my husband was doing such a stupid thing and endangering his life and putting us and the children. So I grabbed him and slapped him, and I heard, "Wah!" Peter Weir that finally had his scene. Though we shot the scene in many, many different ways. That one was never planned. It just came out. Yeah.
Wanted to just flash forward. In the new film Conclave, also co-stars Stanley Tucci.
Yes.
And in 1996, he made Big Night with
Yes.
Campbell Scott
Yes.
that you're in. Terrific movie. Did that also have a feeling of camaraderie? Because it.
Oh, yes,
when you
completely.
watch it, it just looks like the most fun.
It was. I had done the film with John Schlesinger with Campbell Scott. And Campbell Scott called me and he said, with my friend Stanley Tucci, we want to direct a film, the first film that he directed. It was Big Night. It was so charming. And we filmed in New York. And yes, we are still very good friends. Yes, it was a great sense of camaraderie.
Now, around that same time, I think 96 or so, is when Lancome came to you and said that what they are selling is the dream of youth. And unfortunately, they said
like Death Becomes Her.
like that. Yeah, exactly. They might as well have been in the movie. That you didn't meet that anymore. But see, the thing is what's the amazing part of that story is that how many years?
23 years
23
later.
years later.
They called me back. Well, thank Lancome, thank the wisdom of women, I have to say. I think what happened, it was, one of the most interesting aspects of working with Lancome is that they are a service, right? So they reflect what is in society. People say they should do this, they should do that, but it's not a political party, it's not a movement. They respond to the demand. So when they let me go, I was 42, and they didn't renew my contract. We were very, very successful. And when I asked to talk to the executive, I always asked to talk to the executive, to the director, to the producers. I said, well, why? I mean, I'm so successful. Generally, when you're successful at something, you get a promotion, if anything. Why? And they said, because women dream to be young. And at 42, you cannot represent that dream. And advertisement is about dreams. So I was substituted with a younger person, Juliette Binoche, the wonderful Juliette Binoche. And then, I asked my friends, do you dream to be young? Oh, no. Yeah, right. But they did the marketing. I asked my 10 friends, or it wasn't really a kind of a scientific research. And for a long time, maybe the first 3, 4, 5 years, because there was a negative response. Some of the client complained, I'm 50 and you don't make the cream for me. You're like Isabella, go. And, so there was a backlash that Lancome didn't expect it. So I had dreamed that maybe they will call me back. But I waited 3, 4, 5 years. Then I sort of given up. And 23 years later, I was completely surprised. So what happened, I think, it was that there was an evolution in the modeling job. At the beginning, I was the Delphine Seyrig made a fantastic film called Sois belle and tais-toi, Be Beautiful and Shut Up, interviewing all the stars of the 50s and 60s, women. A lot of them wanted to be director, but they didn't think they could. So it was Be Beautiful and Shut Up, you know. And the models were the Be Beautiful and Shut Up. Then the journalists started to be women, and they wanted to know, but are you the model? Are you using this product? So I was asked to give interviews, and Lancome was taken back. You don't want to talk to the executive? Don't you want to talk about the bottom line and how much money we make and all that? No. So I started to talk, and that was very successful. I became, from a model, I became a spokesperson. And then as the women evolved their emancipation in society, the CEO became women. Mm-hmm. And I think they understand makeup not only as a tool of seduction, because it is a tool of seduction, but it's also a tool of seduction. It's also fun, it's also creative, it's also elegant. We're also doing it because we like it. And I think when women became executive, they thought that proposing makeup just as a tool of seduction was limiting. And the advertisement changed completely. So I'm not now the only models. There are people of all ages, all weight, because weight, being thin is like being a saint. It's like it has become a proportion of respect that is, beyond any rationale. And even talent. First they went from modeling to some acting. Now they have poet, influencer, rappers. It's so interesting. And I remember when Lancome called me back, I said, can I fly to Paris? Because I'm 23 years older, so I'm 65. I mean, you have to see me. I didn't became older. I didn't become any younger. What about that dream? And they said, well, come. Then I said, if you want to fight ages, why get me? Get Meryl Streep, get Helen Mirren. Because if I come back, it will start again the controversy, and these big companies are very careful with no, we want you. So you have to explain me what you expect of me and what do I say? So I fly in. I'm Swedish, like Mama. I arrive very punctual. That day I was even anxious, so I arrived before everybody, and I was waiting at the restaurant, and I see a motorcycle and a beautiful woman in a leather pants and black jacket, took the cask off, hair like Brigitte Bardot, blonde, and she came, boom, boom, boom. Hi, I'm Lancome, new CEO. And I just said, I got my answer. It's a woman thing, and it is a woman thing. Though Françoise Liman would say, no, she's modest, but no, it is a woman's thing. There's a real movement to be inclusive, to be kind, and to celebrate creativity.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. My saga with Lancome, one day they say, we should have never let you go. I said, no, first of all, the story is better that way. Yeah. And also, because I was Ingrid Bergman's daughter, and because I was so lucky to have Lancome, which is like winning the lottery, because they pay you an immense amount of money for very little work, I always had the doubt, am I capable of having a career? Am I capable of being financially independent? But when you let me go, and I was able to come back and work, not to come back to Lancome, but invent my professional life, continue my career, it gave me such sense of assurance. Yes. So it was fine. Let me go so I could come back stronger. Oh, thank you.
Also, I'm wondering, this might be too personal, but your mother passed away. She was only 67. Mm. And you've now outlived her.
Yeah.
In a
both
different.
My parents.
Both your parents. Yeah.
It's an incredible, strange feeling. Mm.
That's what I was curious to ask about, because I think we all have this thing. Those who have lost a parent, the conversation continues.
Oh yes, conversation continues. Do not worry. They still talk to me. And I still talk to them. I do a film and wonder, would they like it? Would they agreed of that? How would have they reacted? But even not only a film.
Maybe they would have argued about Blue Velvet.
Yes. Well, of course, I asked myself a lot about that. because, of course, there was nudity and violence, and I think it would have been hard for them to see it. But listen to this. David Lynch had not made a film and wanted to make Eraserhead, his first film, and asked several universities and schools. And he was accepted at Centro Sperimentale Italiano, a Rome school of film that was directed by my father. And my father had offered him to come to Rome for a whole year to study with him. Then David didn't go because he found the money in Hollywood, or not the Hollywood studio, he found, I don't know, a grant to start making Eraserhead. But that was so touching to me when I found that out, because Father had seen in David the talent. So I think eventually, I think they would have accepted all the nudity and the violence and the controversy.
Do you watch your parents' movies still? I don't know, because I think you don't really love watching. You do see your own work, but you don't go back to it.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I don't go back to it because it reminds me of that moment, and that person is dead, and that person disappeared. I don't know. It's just so sad to look back. I try always to look forward, but I do look at my parents' film. I'm very involved in. With the Cineteca di Bologna and all the film restoration, all my mother's paper, she kept everything orderly, Swedish. Letters, contract, diaries, photos. It's at Wesleyan University, at a beautiful archive there. She's with Divine. When I see John Waters, we say, from here to eternity, together.
I want to.
What a combination!
I want to get to some of these questions too, but actually, before we do that, to discuss this year, because actually Conclave is coming out soon, but actually that's just one of a few films. You had a very good cameo in the Adam Sandler Spaceman movie, which we can see, and also I think we've talked about finding young filmmakers and fresh talent. And one of the purest visions in cinema today is a woman named Alice Rohrwacher.
Yeah, she is.
And if people haven't seen La Chimera or Happy as Lazaro, which you're not in, but you're in La Chimera, it opened here and played for 6 months in
downtown.
Yeah.
Incredible.
But maybe to discuss the La Chimera, where you play like almost like Charles Dickens' Miss Havisham kind of a character, an old aunt, and Conclave. These are characters without vanity.
No.
Mm-hmm. But you. It's just so great to see you in them, and it's just, in both films you come in every few 15 or 20 minutes you appear again.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want to just talk about meeting Alice.
So I worked with Alice's sister, Alba Rohrwacher. You see her in Maria this year. She's playing the maid of Maria Callas. So Alba said, my sister wants to meet you. And I meet this sister with red cheeks. They are daughters of beekeepers, a hippie beekeeper, German beekeeper. That's why the last name is Rohrwacher, who probably left in the 60s or 70s, Germany to live in Italy and be a beekeeper. And they had a life in the country of total seclusion, away from big cities. And these two sisters, they had two daughters. One is Alba, one of the most respected Italian actresses, and now Alice is becoming such a respected filmmaker. So I always ask the parents, how does it feel to have two daughters? Boom, they're now, at the Cannes Film Festival in New York, everywhere. And they are very proud of them. There is a poetry about both of them that touches me. In Alice's work, I'm still keeping my eyes open, because I think that, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, we see women filmmakers making film a little bit like Lancome. My woman CEO wants to express other things than Makeup for Seduction, you see stories that could only be told by women. In this, I include Barbie. That sense of humor, that feminist sense of humor, could only come really it could have come from a man, but chances are that it come from a woman. And Alice had this very, very strong woman's voice. And when I try to understand what I mean by that when it comes to Alice, is that the films are never about a love interest, but it's more family, it's more the group. And I think for us women, it's very important, the family and the community. That's part of our reality, stronger than the love, although that is very celebrated in film. And in Alice, there is always this choir. I don't know if you've seen La Chimera, but there is it's about tomb raiders. And the tomb raider, they have some character, but also it's like a choir. It's a group of people. And I play a very old lady who has 5 daughters. And the 5 daughters is another choir. It's always these people moving, talking. And it's something very moving. Also, what moves me about Alice's work is that I can see my father, Fellini, De Sica, Pasolini, all people that I grew up with. Yet she has her own voice, but she's rooted in this glorious Italian cinema. So I have enormous admiration for her work.
And then with Conclave, the movie was shot in Cinecitta.
Yes.
The most famous movie studio in the world, but it's in Italy. Where your dad?
My dad, my father's friends, all shot. I mean, when Federico Fellini died, Studio 5, Studio number 5, which is the biggest one, where they did the funeral right there. They brought the body right there. It was moving to me to be in Cinecitta. And Conclave is the election of the new Pope, and it takes place in the Sistine Chapel, where we couldn't really film in the Sistine Chapel. So they rebuilt the Sistine Chapel in Cinecitta, and to perfection. And that is due to the tradition that my father, Fellini, Visconti, Pasolini, have created, because they fostered a group of artisans, of painters, of sculpting, of carpenters. They could reconstruct. And I was so proud, when we walked in that set, looking exactly like the Sistine Chapel that we went to visit, a production. The producer had organized a private visit of the Sistine Chapel, and then we went to the studio. It looked exactly the same. And I couldn't help thinking of the legacy that my father and his friend has left. This wouldn't have been possible without them. That amazing mastery.
Incredible. There's a couple questions here I just want to ask. What would you say is the biggest lesson or biggest piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
I think I was a late bloomer. I became a model late, I became an actress late, I became a director, I direct short comical film late.
And you have a master's degree in
ethology, which is animal behavior and conservation. So all the film that I do as a director are about animals, comical about animals.
We cannot, we must talk about green porno.
Yes.
That's what it's called, so we can all go out.
I wish I'd done everything earlier. I was always hesitant. I don't know why, afraid to be compared to my mother, respecting overly, I think my father would have loved for me to be a director, but I never felt like I was good enough to be as good as Marty, my father, David, And then you have your own voice. It doesn't have to be as big, it doesn't have to be a big film. It can be green porno, but it's still a voice. And it takes a long time. I don't know. I wish I had more time because I had so much fun. And I wish I gave I didn't direct when I was 60, but I direct when I was 30, because some of it you learn as you go along. But now it's too late. No.
You did.
This is what I am. You take me as I am. Nothing I can improve.
When the pandemic was happening, you also did a called Sex and Consequences, a series,
Yes.
a Zoom series.
Yes, a Zoom show. I did it. I was really dedicated to Georges Méliès. Georges Méliès, in the beginning of last century, was really the first filmmaker. Marty Scorsese did a beautiful film called Hugo
Yeah.
about him. Georges Méliès made his film show. He was a toy maker and a magician, and he saw films linked to that, and he made films that are such a delight, a silent film, of course. And then he had very patient women sometimes coloring each frame by hand. And so there's some films that are in color, but the color varies because there were women coloring each frame. And Georges Méliès lived here. He had a greenhouse where he shot his film. And I have a big barn, and I slept there and did my Sex and Consequences right there. So it was great to reach out and still talk to people and have an audience and feel like, I don't know, my father made film after the war, and there was no money. He didn't even have films. He got films sometime from the American Army who gave him piece of film. So sometime he had a piece that was longer so the scene could be long, or something that was short, and made Open City, made Paisa with no means. My father always said, it's important not how you want to say, what you want to say. So during the pandemic, I said, I want to make people laugh about animals. So I could do it from my home, and we did a Zoom show.
To just because there are questions here about what gives you the most pleasure off screen, to talk about Mama Farm, about 30 acres or 20 something acres with all of the animals, a lot of host. I think a bed and breakfast possibly.
Yes, So well, it happened about 12, 15 years ago when I didn't have yet Lancome back, and also. It wasn't only Lancome that didn't renew my contract. Also, I lost 2 agents that didn't want me, and little by little, I felt, well, maybe my work as a model, as an actress, comes to an end. And I was sad, but I didn't want to linger in sadness. I said, what else is interesting? So I always wanted, when I was a little girl, to be an ethologist, which is the animal behavior, maybe the maximum. Scientist on this is Jane Goodall, that you might know her. And but at the time when I was 20 and ready to go to university, there was biology, zoology, but not ethology. And I was I wasn't sure that I had the brain to do science. Another mistake, because I do have the brain, or whatever you understand might be limited, but you can push it, you can try. But I don't know, those are the mistakes we make. But then when Lancome let me go, modeling, acting came to an end, my agent left me. Ethology. I went to a lecture by a fantastic character called Temple Graydon, who is an autistic lady. They made a beautiful film about her. And so I went to hear her and at Hunter College, and they were showing up little leaflet saying, we just opened an ethology department for a master degree in ethology and conservation. And I signed up right that evening. And I had just come out of an hospital because I have a very bad back and I had a major operation. So I went in a wheelchair with my nurse. And my nurse helped me sign up because she had just graduated from Hunter College because the bureaucracy is very complicated. So she helped me, and I remember the first class I came in a wheelchair. I remember the professor looking at this old lady in a wheelchair. Then he recognized me. He couldn't make any of it.
You've also worked with seeing eye dogs.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
So I did a play and here in New York, and at the end of the play, my co-star, Yul Vasquez, said, oh, well, you want to have dinner with my wife? I said, yes, let's have dinner with your wife. Oh, she's coming. Let's wait for her at this subway station. And she came out of the subway with a dog, a Labrador. I said, how do you go to the subway with a Labrador? She said, I volunteer for the Guide Dog Foundation. And since then, Linda Larking, she's also an actress. She's the voice of Princess Jasmine in Disney. We raised 10 guide dogs for the blind. And now Linda is a lot in Florida, so I lost my accomplice. So Now I do something else. I have mama dog. Right now I have a dog called Rosie. She's a breeder, and every year she makes puppies. They select, for talent to be guide dog or service dogs. And so every summer, Rosie has puppies that I raised till they are 7 or 8 weeks old. And tomorrow I'm going to Boston to talk at the Science Museum with a fantastic scientist called Brian Hare from Duke University, who has done a deep study on cognition, which is intelligence, but scientists, they always want to change words, so they say cognition of animals. So that's another interest of mine, yeah.
I imagine, yeah, please. With all this going on, I imagine that sometimes you probably get homesick when you're away from...
Yeah, I get very homesick.
But someone here asked, is there a memento, something special you take with you when you go, for example, to Rome for a few months?
No, not really. I get increasingly homesick.
Yeah.
I think, so I wrote several monologues, always comical monologues about animals, and the last one called Darwin wrote a book called In the Expression of Emotion of Men and Animals. Expression of emotion is what we actors do, right? And Darwin studied the expression of emotion in men and animals, asking himself a very simple question. If I smile, it's understood all over the world, but if I do this, is understood only in Italy, because some gesture we learned in our culture, but some other gesture, like smiling, trembling when you're afraid, even disgust. And he looked at all the animals and he saw commonality. Animals also tremble. He also thought that animals laughed. Smiling is more difficult to detect. And he also experimented with photography. This book is the first book that included photography. Of course, that's modeling, acting, it's all about photography. So I wrote a monologue making a parallel and telling all the story of Darwin. He's experimenting with photography, what he said about expression of emotion, because he wondered if the expression of emotion that emanate from us, are they shaped by evolution? So he looked at his children. He had 8 children when they were very small, and they couldn't have learned the cultural gesture. And babies, they smile. Even a baby who was blind, who has never seen a smile, would tremble if afraid. And so he did a study on that. And it's a fascinating, so I made a comical, but very scientific monologue that I'm leaving next week to do in France, because unfortunately I'm fluent in French. So my monologue, which is 60 pages long, I had to do it in Italian, in English, and in French. Oof. Now I'm learning Spanish, but I haven't told anybody, because I want to stay home. I don't want to travel.
So somewhat on that theme, I wanted to point out that you had said your mother gave you advice once about acting, and she said, when in doubt.
Oh yeah, no, she told about Casablanca. Mm-hmm. Casablanca was a very difficult film because they kept on rewriting the script, especially the ending. Would mother run away with Humphrey Bogart, who played the lovers, or would stay with the husband, played with Paul Henriette? And they couldn't make up. In fact, they were going to film both endings and then show it to the audience and decide which ending was going. But the first one that they did was the one that is in the film with mother's character staying with her husband. And he tested so well that they never filmed the alternative. But mother had to do the scene where she enters the Rick Cafe and sees Humphrey Bogart, Rick's her lover, and Mama writes in her autobiography. I went to the director, Michael Curtiz, and I said, I know that you haven't decided the ending yet, but I just want to know, who am I in love with? My husband or my lover? And Michael Curtiz answered, we don't know yet. Can you play it in between? And she said, I could not play it in between. But mother, and I'm giving you part of my monologue, mother, that was an actress, a great actress, therefore good observer of human behavior, noticed that sometimes the most shocking news, the most frightening moment where you're lost, I register with very little, maybe in great secrecy. And I thought to do my makeup, my close-up, assuming that expression, because I always knew there was going to be music. And the music was going to indicate to the audience what I really felt. But if I tinted my expression with, the ending couldn't have worked either way. So I thought it was such an old fox, Mama was. She knew every trick of the trade, isn't it? To do this neutral expression so it could be used for either ending and counting in the complicity of music. That takes a very experienced actor to make that decision, isn't it?
So in a way, yeah, just don't gear up, don't overthink everything so much.
No, so much, but I think it's true. You know, sometimes I remember just recently seeing on television and thinking of that story. Somebody was telling me there was a murder, you know, and the person knew the guy that was the assassin. He said, "Oh, you know, he was a nice guy." You know, sometimes you see it on television that there's no emotion, you know, because not yet is digested. So you have this kind of neutral, like, what? And I think it was so brilliant to decided to make that expression for Casablanca.
Yes, yes. Is that your favorite of? I've heard you say Notorious.
I think
with Cary
Notorious.
Grant.
I think she's so good. I mean, she's good always, but in Notorious, she's so wonderful, and she has to play that arc of that superficial girl that becomes. I thought it was a wonderful film, isn't it? So is Casablanca, because Casablanca is also, you know, Casablanca. You really have a good teaching about there is no small role or big role.
Oh yeah.
Casablanca really. Every small role is so well casted, so well written, amazing.
Well, and that goes back to what we were saying, is that you've over your career, you've popped up in cameo roles, in addition, of course, to lead roles, but, you know, leave that impression. But as we finish up here, someone asked, I guess it's a philosophical question. What do you want to be remembered for?
I don't. It's a question that, you know, I don't know that I will be remembered. You know what I mean? You know, I mean, my children will remember me, but I don't know that we will be remembered. I think we're going to be forgotten. When I think of silent movies, and I love silent movies, but I can say the name of 10 silent movie stars, and there were so many. And they were so celebrated, maybe even more than today's stars, because cinema was the new technology. When you see the images of Charlie Chaplin in the crowds, I mean, there are thousands of people around him standing up on a car. You know, that I don't know that it happens. So I don't know that we will be remembered. But, you know, in Italy, there is a church by monks, crazy monks, that started to sell. Now the church, the Vatican has forbidden that, but there were the Cappuccini's monk, like the cappuccino that we drink. There's an order called the Cappuccini that celebrated death, because then you go to paradise. And so when the monk died, they decorated the church with their bones, chandeliers, tables, all done with the bones. Now the church has forbidden it. But when you enter that church in Rome, which is next to the American Embassy in Via Veneto, there is a writing that is very telling. And he says, talking about the bones inside, "We were what you are. You will be what we are." And I believe that more than remembering is more that the truth.
I wanted to finish with a short anecdote. A few days ago, interviewed the cinematographer of Conclave,
Yes.
Stéphane Fontaine.
Yes.
And he said that he was setting up in one of the early scenes. It was the first time when you're listening to something that Ralph Fiennes' character is saying, and it's a close-up of you, and I think of your hands. And he looked through the camera lens at your close-up, and he thought he was going to cry.
Oh, really?
Because of everything that you have meant to us in the audience. And he was, of course, right then the audience. And I just want to echo his sentiments
thank
today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And say thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You know, nowadays, when I start working, they always said, "Oh, you're first." Oh, this is Isabella, Ingrid Bergman's daughter. That how, yeah. And sometimes today, they don't know it, so I say it. You know, my mom is Ingrid Bergman. She was a famous actress. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.